Welcome to the CloudBees Rollout Workshop. So in this workshop, we're going to be focusing on CloudBees Rollout. We're going to be working with feature flags specifically. And so just a quick overview of what we'll be accomplishing throughout this workshop, right? First, we're going to set up, just run through the setup for the workshop. There's a couple of components to this. If you attended the CloudBees core workshop, you've actually gotten a lot of the setup out of the way already. For those of you that haven't, we're going to spend a little bit of time setting up CloudBees core to be your automation engine, basically to build and deploy our application that we're going to be using in this workshop. Then we're going to go and add a brand new feature to our application. Our application is just a simple front end kind of little microblog. And so we're going to go through, we're going to add a feature to that application, and then we're going to gate that feature behind a feature flag. And then we're going to control the value of that feature flag through the rollout dashboard itself. We're going to dive into a little bit of user targeting, see how we can use user properties to determine which version of the flag a user will get. Then we'll look at what Rollout offers as far as configuration as code goes. And finally, at the very last lab, we'll focus on analytics and A/B testing and that kind of experimentation use case that comes with using Rollout or a feature flag management solution. And so we just want to note that probably we're not going to get through all 6 labs, but that's okay. All of this material is freely available on GitHub. You can use the workshop instructions to get through this yourself. The environment that we're going to be doing these workshops in is going to be available until next Monday. And then your rollout trial that you're going to use for this workshop is available to you for 2 weeks, for 14 days. So even if we don't get through all the labs today, if you'd like to, you're able to come back, pick up from where we left off, start over from the beginning. You know, if you want to invite somebody else that wasn't able to attend, right, this environment will still be up for a little bit for you to be able to take advantage of that. And so just a quick overview of the tools that we'll be using in the workshop itself. We're going to be using Zoom breakout rooms for the majority of the workshop material. And so right now we're all together, but while we're all together, I'm going to give a quick overview of what Rollout is, what feature flags are, and what we're going to do in the workshops. But then we're going to split up into a couple of breakout rooms. They'll be smaller, kind of more, more face-to-face interaction. It'll be much more interactive, basically. So you can use the Zoom chat right now to introduce yourself, ask questions, things like that. There's plenty of helpers that can answer you. But so we're going to be grouping people into breakout rooms based on if you attended the previous CloudBees core workshop or not. If you have attended the CloudBees core workshop, that means you have a little bit of that initial setup already done, right? You have core setup, you have that automated pipeline ready to go. If you didn't, that's fine. That's going to be kind of the first step that you go through in your own breakout room. And so, yeah, once in the breakout rooms, please feel free to ask questions via audio, unmute yourself, make it conversational. And so, yeah, just kind of take advantage of that. We want the breakout rooms to be much more personal experience. Even though we're virtual, we want it to be kind of like that standard small workshop environment. And so just for those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, right, there is the ability to rename yourself. So we're actually going to ask that you go ahead and rename yourself, right? If you see in the picture, Kurt Medell has a 1 next to his name. If you did attend the core workshop, please rename yourself with a 1. If you didn't, please rename yourself with a 2 in front of your name. And so in this screenshot, it kind of shows how to rename yourself if you're not familiar with Zoom, and then some other things, right? Like how to chat, where you can ask questions. There's the nonverbal feedback available as well. So just kind of, for those of you not familiar with Zoom just yet, go ahead and kind of take a look at how that works, and then go ahead and rename yourself based on if you attended the core workshop or didn't. And then like Kurt said, we're pretending that none of us attended the core workshop to start for this one. So the lab environment that we'll be in today, there's a couple of components to this. So the workshop mainly is going to be using the CloudBees Rollout SaaS offering, right, running on AWS. So each attendee is going to sign up for a CloudBees Rollout account, right? So we have a free trial available to you, and that's what we're going to be using for this workshop. Each one of us is going to go ahead and sign up for a free trial. If you are already a Rollout customer, you have an account, that's great. If you don't want to sign up for a free trial, you just want to use your existing account, that's fine. You can sign in as normal. We're just going to create a new application under your account. The workshop also uses, like I mentioned, we're going to be using a CloudBees core cluster, which is an enterprise version of Jenkins. For those of you that attended the core workshop, you know the setup. It's running in GKE, and the main reason we have this, again, is to provide an automated build and deploy process for everyone's sample applications, right? Because we don't want to, I'm not going to focus almost any attention on core in this workshop, right? We just need some sort of automation engine for us. We are going to be updating our application code throughout the workshop, so we want something that will just automatically build and redeploy it for us. We're actually going to be deploying into an ephemeral environment for everyone. It's really cool, and so that is the core aspect of it. So each attendee will provision their own Jenkins instance for the labs, utilizing CloudBees core. All the instructions for the labs and these slides are publicly available on GitHub. Just like I mentioned before, right? If you fall behind at any point, if you want to come back later, this stuff is available on GitHub. You'll see will be in GitHub repositories for the instructions. And one big aspect of this is attendees will be using their own GitHub accounts. And so if you don't have a GitHub account, that's fine. In a minute here, and the instructions will go through creating one. But if you do, go ahead and make sure you are signed into that GitHub account right now. Okay, so with all of that kind of administrative stuff, administrative introduction out of the way, let's do a quick overview of CloudBees Rollout, right? What are we actually going to learn about today in this workshop? And so the main aspect when it comes to rollout is this idea of feature flagging, right? So first off, we got to know what is feature flagging. At its most simplistic, feature flagging is a practice of wrapping new functionality in conditional code blocks. And so probably a lot of you, if you are developers or even DevOps folks, you probably are familiar with this idea on some level. I'm sure you've, in your applications, used some sort of conditional blocks, and then you check the value for that conditional. You check a configuration file somewhere, right? Or you check a database entry, based on, what kind of user you have or something like that, right? So that's the idea of feature flagging just in general. Feature flags can be used to hide, enable, or disable features during runtime. And that's the really important part of it, right? Is the logic is happening at runtime. You don't have to redeploy an application for different functionality to take place. So with feature flags, a software feature can be tested before it's completed and ready for release, right? And so what we mean by that is you can take code, wrap it in a feature flag, and then you can either have that code on or off, and you can determine that at runtime, right? So now you have that safety blanket that even if code is incomplete, that's fine. You can wrap it in a feature flag. You can tell that flag to be off, and then your code won't run. And so even though the code is not ready for release, you are able to deploy it into your production environment, for example. And then there's a lot of other kind of components to it. Feature flagging also provides an alternative to maintaining multiple feature branches and source code. Again, if your code is wrapped in a feature flag, you can feel more comfortable merging in incomplete code because you know that code isn't going to run. So you can start moving away from these long-lived feature branches, hopefully avoiding merge conflicts, things like that. And so the idea of feature flagging, right, this technique, there's a lot of other benefits that we're going to discuss throughout this workshop, but just quick overview of what a feature flag itself is. And then, so we've got this idea of feature flags, right? And as you start to scale, then you start moving into the world of feature flag management, right? So we, as CloudBees Rollout actually ran a survey, and 95% of respondents' organizations let us know that they have begun implementing, or plan to implement feature flags in the future. And so, again, as I mentioned, I think just the idea of a feature flag is really simple at its core. And so probably a lot of you have some sort of feature toggling in place. And I think that's what this speaks to, right? Is a lot of organizations, vast majority of them are looking into this or have started doing this. And so why, right? Why have they started doing this? And you can kind of see there's 5 big bullet points that companies might have today that they would like to address, and feature flags do a really good job of addressing those. Development headaches, like I mentioned, this merge conflict situation, long-lived feature branches, where your developers spend a lot of time not actually developing but resolving merge conflicts. Very slow feedback loops from when a developer works on something to when they actually get feedback from customers using it. Risk in testing and production, that's a really big component as well, right? Where you are testing your QA environment, you are testing your staging environment, but at the end of the day, how well do those environments match up to your production environment, right? The switch from going from staging to production is a really big kind of flip of the switch, and that's always very risky. Slow time to market, again, the slow feedback loop, the slow time it takes to get features out. And then the last one, right, the need for experimentation and innovation, again, back to that feedback loop. And so all of those is something that feature flags can help address, right? Because now, as I mentioned, you have that safety blanket, you can wrap your code in a feature flag, you can push in incomplete code, you can test in production, you can get code out to your customers faster, get feedback from your customers faster, you can turn code on for specific users, maybe users that are more likely to give feedback, things like that. And so all of these things are things that feature flags can help organizations address. And so then talking about CloudBees feature flag management solution specifically, right? CloudBees Rollout. Rollout itself is a multi-platform infrastructure as code, SaaS, feature management, and remote configuration solution. So basically, Rollout offers management for your feature flags. And there's a couple of reasons, I think, why organizations would look to use a feature flag management solution such as Rollout. And you can see those on this slide here, right? Like I mentioned, a lot of you are probably doing this already, but the problem that can arise is as you start to scale up with your feature flag usage, you can still experience some pains just in terms of how do you know what's turned on where, right? Is it only available to your developers right? Because if it's configuration files and database entries, that's something that usually only developers will access, right? But your release people, your product people probably want to know what features are on or off in production as well. And so that's where like a feature flag management solution such as Rollout will come in. And then you can see some of the other benefits, right? Faster delivery, safer releases, experimentation, customization. Those are kind of the 4 main use cases when it comes to a feature flag management solution. And hopefully throughout this workshop, we can kind of all learn together just how well feature flags and feature flag management solution helps us achieve these 4 use cases here. And then just one quick architectural slide explaining exactly how Rollout works. We'll see this actually in action as we're working. But there's kind of 2 components to this, right? If you can see me waving my mouse here. Everything on the left-hand side, as we mentioned, Rollout is, today we'll be working in the Rollout SaaS version. And so once we're in the Rollout dashboard, setting rules for our flags and things like that, that will be happening on the Rollout servers themselves, right? And then once we set a configuration, we will generate, each one of us will generate a configuration file that has our feature flag rules on it. But the rules themselves will be applying on the end user device, right? And so once we do generate a new configuration, the user device will grab that configuration file from the Rollout servers, store it locally, and then the logic of determining if your flag is on or off will happen on the user device. So just a quick architectural slide. It probably doesn't make a ton of sense yet, but I think once we dive into the workshop and actually start playing around with it, it'll kind of make sense the way this works. Okay, and so now this is where we would break up into our breakout rooms. So for those of you who have attended the first CloudBees Core workshop with hopefully 1 in your name at this point, you'll be put into one breakout room. Those of you who haven't, you'll be put into another. Again, just because those of you that haven't attended the core workshop yet need to do that initial core setup as our automation engine. So let's go ahead and do that now, but we're not actually gonna do that. All right. Welcome everybody to our breakout rooms. You are in this breakout room because you have not attended the initial or the previous CloudBees Core centered workshop, and that's fine. We're going to take the first couple minutes of this workshop to do a little setup to get us up and running. So what are we actually going to be doing in the workshop setup? First thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a GitHub organization where the necessary workshop repositories will automatically be forked for us. So there's 3 repositories needed for this workshop, and that will all be done kind of in an automated fashion for you. We're going to create a CloudBees core master to automate the build and deploy of our microblog sample application. We're going to create a CloudBees rollout account, because we need that in order to utilize CloudBees rollout. We're going to create a new environment within our kind of brand new CloudBees rollout application. And then we're going to take the environment keys from rollout and we're going to add them to the code of our microblog application to enable that kind of initial communication between the code base and rollout dashboard itself. And so that's the steps for the rollout. We won't actually be doing any feature flagging or anything like that in here. We're just getting the setup out of the way for the workshop. And so, everyone in here did not attend that initial core workshop or go through the core lab. So we're going to go ahead and click on this first set of instructions. And for those of you obviously you can't click because you're just watching my screen, the helper will, our helper will send out the instructions in the chat here for you to follow along with. So we're going to navigate here. And so this is the rollout pre-workshop setup. And so we should have all gotten a registration URL in the chat. Let me go ahead and find that. And so if you click on this, as you can see, hopefully you can still see my screen open up in Firefox. The invite code will be Stinger. And then you're going to go ahead and sign up for a new account. Fill out all this info. Sign up. There we go. And now that we've signed up, you're going to go ahead and follow the URL that you are given in the sign up link. And that will actually take you to CloudBees core. But I'm just going to copy and paste this, jump back into Chrome. And then we're going to take that login info, right? When we register, we're going to take that login info and we're going to sign back in. I would check off keep me signed in just in case so you don't have to keep doing this. We're going to sign into CloudBees core. And so now the first thing that we're going to do is, if you saw in your instructions, right, we're actually going to go ahead and create a team master for all of us. And again, we're not going to spend a ton of time focusing on the core aspects of this lab, of this workshop. We're here for rollout, but just again to kind of say why we're doing this. We're creating, we're going to create an automated pipeline basically that will pick up on any changes we make to our rollout application repository. And so it'll build and redeploy our application for us. So go ahead and click on create a team once you get to the screen, and I'll wait just a little bit, let people get registered, get signed up, everything like that. Make sure we're all here together. And again, if you have any questions at this point, now that we're in the breakout room, definitely feel free to unmute yourself, ask it out loud. I'll try my best to monitor the chat, but if you have a question, definitely unmute yourself and ask. We can make this as interactional as possible. So once we get to this screen, let's go ahead and click on create a team. And so this will take us through just a simple team creation process. So go ahead and name your team, right? You're gonna be naming your master. I would recommend naming it after your GitHub username. We're gonna get into that part in a second. For those of you, this is for the essays that have been here, try to not name this master the same as you've named a previous one. I know we had some issues with that in the past. I don't know if that's been fully resolved, but don't mess. If you create a new master, don't name it the same thing if you attended the core workshop before. This. Then you can choose an icon that you want for. You can give it a color. We'll go through that. We're not going to add anyone to our team. This is just our own personal master. For the cluster endpoint, again, we're not going to change any of this default stuff. As we mentioned, we are in GKE, so we're going to keep the cluster endpoint the same. and we are going to use a basic master creation recipe. So go ahead and click on create team. And so now, while this wheel is spinning, right, CloudBees Core is provisioning a new master for everyone inside of this workshop, inside of this breakout room. And so while that's running, I'm going to go ahead and hop back into the instructions. While that's running, it's going to take a couple minutes. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get the GitHub side of things taken care of. So if anyone in here does not have a GitHub account currently, right, there are instructions here on how to create a new GitHub account. Go ahead and go through that process. I'll wait at the end of the lab, in case you do get a little behind, we'll wait for everyone to catch up. But I'm going to go ahead as if I do have a GitHub account, which I do. And so for those of you that do have a GitHub account, we're going to go ahead and create a GitHub personal access token inside our GitHub account, right? We need this in order to set up the webhooks and the permissions for CloudBees Core to actually pick up and build our repository for us. So go ahead and click on this link in the instructions. I'm going to open it in a new tab. But if you click that link, it'll actually check off all the right permissions needed for you. So you're not going to, if you click that link, you'll have the correct personal access token, basically. So go ahead and do that. In the note, I'm just going to say Rollout Workshop 5-13 to let me know what day I was working on this workshop. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick, just so you guys don't steal my personal access token from me. But so when you get to that next screen, right, you should have a personal access token and you have the ability to copy it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and store it somewhere temporarily. Basically, once you navigate away from that page, you won't be able to get that personal access token again. So make sure you copy paste it somewhere. We don't want to lose access to it. So now let me go ahead and start sharing my screen again. Okay, so now that we've created a personal access token, the next step for all of us is going to be to create a GitHub organization within GitHub, right? And so the reason we're doing this is, again, once we set up the pipelines and things like that, so we want to have kind of like a clean slate where we're going to fork over a couple of repositories into. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in a new tab. You can see I've got a couple organizations. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. We're going to pick the free version here, right? Nothing that we're doing today in this workshop or in any of these labs will require any money or anything like that from you. So go ahead and click on the free version. We're going to give it we're going to select the name for a GitHub organization. It's just important that you remember what you actually create here. So let me go ahead and come up with a name that hopefully is available. Cool, this is available. I'm going to copy this so I don't forget it either. Personal account. I'm going to click on next. When you do create a GitHub organization initially, you can add people. We're just going to skip this step for now. There we go, right? We have a GitHub org available to us. And so now this is where we are going to, in a second here, we're going to run a setup job through Core, through Jenkins, that will fork over a couple of repositories into this organization. And so I'll hop back over to the instructions. Again, I'm going to take a quick pause, let anyone catch up. So at this point, as you saw, right, we should be at the point where we have our master, hopefully for everyone, is up and running right now. We have generated our personal access token in GitHub, put that somewhere, in some file somewhere, in a text file, something like that. And then we've also created a GitHub organization that is just sitting there empty right now. And so I'm going to wait, let anyone catch up who might not have done those steps yet. But once we are there, we're going to move forward with the workshop. We have kind of one last little setup step to get through for this initial setup. All right. Now I'm assuming everyone else is at the same point where I am with the things that I mentioned. And so for that, right, if you hop back into your CloudBees Core environment, right, into this tab here, you should see our master is up and running. And this is kind of the screen that you should see in front of you, right? You should see two jobs available to you, right? These are Jenkins jobs. And so the one we're going to pick is the Rollout Workshop Setup. And so when you go in here, you can see the job has not been run yet. We want to run this job, and I'll kind of talk through what this job does as it's running. But as the name implies, this is going to take care of some setup aspects for us. So go ahead and hit run, right? And now we need to fill out all this information again. So let me stop sharing my screen again. I lost my personal access token, so I don't want you seeing it. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. And then let me share my screen again. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and paste your GitHub personal access token that you generated earlier in here. So again, we need this for kind of the automation aspects to be able to pull things out, to fork things over, things like that. The GitHub username that you're using for this workshop, right? So you can see this is my GitHub username that I'm signed in with over here. So throw that in there. The GitHub org that we just created, right? So again, you can see the name of mine up there as well. So I'm going to throw that in there. Make sure you spell everything right. It's very important. And so once you've done this, you're not going to change the fourth input at all. Once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and hit run, right? And so now you can see we've started running the rollout workshop setup job. And you can see the little wheel spinning. You know, while this is running, if you're paying attention to this screen, the core screen specifically, you might notice, I think we have a screenshot down here, right? You might get this kind of little gray screen. And so the reason that'll happen is this setup job will actually restart your master. But basically what this job is doing, or you might even see a 503. Again, this is fine. Basically what this job is doing, as we mentioned, there's 3 repositories needed for this workshop. And so first the job is going to fork over those 3 repositories into your GitHub organization. And then we're actually going to re-provision each one of our team masters individually. We're taking some configuration as code, things like that. We're applying it to those masters just so we can have a job kind of ready to go, you know, an automated pipeline ready to go for us when we do start editing our application code. So we'll have a job there for us that will build and deploy our application for us. So that's what this initial setup job is taking care of. I guess it doesn't actually restart the master. So then you should not see any gray screen whatsoever. If you do see one, let me know, because that's bad then in that situation. But so while that is up and running, I'm going to go ahead and proceed to the next lab. And let me open up. Yeah, let me open up the slides. Or no, we don't need to go back to slides. So now let's just go ahead and proceed into the next lab, right? At the bottom of the instructions, you saw a link there, right? So what we just did was the pre-workshop setup. Now we're going to go through, and while our master is running our setup job for us, we're going to go through and do the workshop setup now, which focuses more on the rollout side of things, right? So again, I'll take a quick pause, let anyone catch up, right? The point we're at right now is we have a GitHub org, and we've kicked off this job inside of our core environment, inside of Jenkins, right? We've kicked off the setup job that should be forking over repositories, things like that for us. So I'll just take a quick pause there. Any questions so far, anything like that, feel free to add them in the chat. And while people are catching up, right, again, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the rollout setup, right? Like we mentioned, we're going to go into, we're all going to sign up for a rollout trial account. We're going to go into the rollout dashboard. We're going to provision our new environments in there. We're going to edit our application code a little bit, things like that. But yeah, I'll take a quick pause. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get started on the workshop setup portion, right? So you can see the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the sign up form that will take us to CloudBees rollout. And hopefully I'm not logged in right now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and you're going to fill out this sign up information to sign up for a trial of rollout, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add my name here. Add my email, then you'll add your password. Make sure you check off I agree to rollout's term of service at the bottom here and click sign up. And so once you do sign up, it will take you straight into the rollout dashboard with that trial account that you just created. So hopefully Again, I'll take a quick pause, let everyone catch up, but hopefully everyone should be seeing this screen inside of the rollout dashboard. You'll get this fun chat bot that wants to come talk to you. You can talk to it if you want, let it know who you are. I'm just gonna X out of it. But yeah, so everyone should be looking at this screen. I'll take a quick pause here. If you're having trouble signing up for whatever reason, definitely message something in the chat. So I know for those, just, you know, for the SAs in here that have already signed up for a rollout account, you can either just sign into your existing environment and just create a new application. You could create a new account. You saw me do like the little plus X trick to sign up for a rollout account. You can do that as well. Rollout won't let you sign up for multiple different accounts with the same email. So that's why I'm saying that. Either go sign into an existing account or use a new email address to sign up for this workshop, but I'll take a second to let everyone figure out what they're doing on that end. Okay, and just to kind of jump back into the instructions, once we have created our new account, right, the thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to create a brand new environment in the dashboard here, right? You can see when we initially create our application, we're only given a production environment to work with, right? But in this workshop, we're actually going to mimic kind of a real world-ish scenario where we're not going to be working strictly in the production environment. We are actually going to have a development environment for all of us. And so that's what we want to do to start. We want to create a development environment inside of the rollout dashboard as well. So go ahead and click on App Settings on the left-hand side here. You can see me hovering over it right now. Click on App Settings. And then on here, right, in this bar, click on environments, right? So in this screen in your rollout dashboard, you can actually, for this specific application, this is where you would control what environments are available within this application, right? So you can see we have a production environment, it has a description for it. And the important thing is there's a key, there's an environment key associated with it, right? In a second here, you'll see why this is important. We use these keys to establish that communication between the rollout dashboard and our application code. So go ahead and click on Add New Environment. And this is where we're going to add our development environment that I mentioned earlier, right? So go ahead and name this environment development. You can give it a description if you want, saying, hey, this is our development environment. I'm going to leave it blank. But go ahead and click on Generate Key and copy that. Or I guess don't copy that. That's not. Basically, what we need both of these environments. You can see, you know, we can copy both of these keys with a click of a button. But just be aware, now we have two environments within our application, a dev environment and a prod environment. Keep this screen up. We're going to jump back into the instructions where we're going to take those keys in just a second, and we're going to update our application code with those keys. And so you can see that's kind of the next step in the instructions here. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate back to my GitHub org. I'm going to click refresh, right? Refresh the page. So our job, our core setup job, should have finished running by this point. If you do not have any repositories in your GitHub organization after you refresh the page, first go ahead and check, make sure that your job has finished running. If the job has finished running and you don't have any repositories here, or your job still hasn't finished running, go ahead and ask something in the chat. I see, yeah, Elena only has 2 repositories, not microblog. So hopefully one of our helpers can go ahead and help out with that. And then I'll take a quick pause just to make sure that we're all kind of, again, on the same page while Elena's getting helped out. We should be at the point where we have in rollout generated 2 environments, right? Dev and prod, with both of their environment keys. We haven't done anything else in the rollout and dashboard. And then at this point, right, we're going to take these keys and we're going to add them to our application code. So again, just to kind of hop back into the instructions real quick, we are going to jump into our GitHub org, and we're going to jump into the microblog front end application. And again, hopefully, for anyone that's behind, you can kind of catch up on the instructions. This part, you know, we'll wait at the end of the setup lab just to make sure everyone's all caught up. But we're pretty close to the end of the setup lab here. But inside of the microblog front-end repository, this repository is the repo that has our application code in it, right? This is going to be the application that we're going to be putting feature flags into. We're going to be segmenting our users on, everything like that, right? This is where the source code for this application lives. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to switch from the master branch to the development branch of our application. Again, that's why we created the development environment. We don't want to be doing work on our master branch directly. We're going to be, we're going to model a real organization here. We're going to be doing work in the development branch, testing it out, that kind of thing before we push things into production. So switch over into the development branch. And at the root level of the repository, you should see two files. And these are the files I'm highlighting right now, .env production and env development, right? These two files right here. And so we'll click into these files in just a second, but basically these files, right, these are just configuration files that will hold our environment, rollout environment keys for us, right? We don't want to hard code these values into our code. That's not a best practice. So we're just going to have, configuration files with the environment keys in them, and then we'll actually read the environment key from that configuration file. So go ahead and click into the production environment configuration file, right? .env.production. Click into here, and we're going to edit this, right? You can see right here we have a portion where we're going to throw in our production key. So go ahead and click on the little pencil. This pencil lets you edit files inside of GitHub directly, right? We're not going to be pulling code locally or anything like that in this workshop. We're going to be doing everything through the GitHub UI. And so yeah, go ahead and click on the pencil here to edit the file. And so you should see right now you have the ability to edit. I'm going to jump back into the rollout dashboard. I'm going to click on this key right here. You should be doing the same in your dashboard, right? So if you click on this key, that'll actually copy that to your clipboard for you. And then if I hop back over here, highlight your production key here and replace that with my actual production key, right? So what you should be seeing now is view app rollout key equals, and then your production key value from your rollout dashboard, right, for that production environment in there. Go ahead and add a commit message, add production rollout environment key. And we're going to go ahead and commit that to the development branch. Again, I want to stress that. Make sure you are currently on the development branch and not on the master branch. Go ahead and commit that change. And now we're going to go ahead and do the same for that .env.development file, right? So if you saw what I'm doing, I'm not trying to move too quick or anything. All right, I moved back to the root level of our repository here, back into that .env.development file. This file looks exactly the same as the production one. And now again, what we're going to do is we're going to take this snippet here and we're going to replace it with our development key. So go ahead and click on the little pencil again to edit this file and jump back into the rollout dashboard and now grab your development key, right? Again, make sure you're not, throwing your production key into your development file. It works both ways, and don't throw your development key into your production file. So go ahead and take that and replace it with your development key. I'm just going to make sure that I pasted in the right one. It ends with F8, so does this one. Great. And let's go ahead and commit this, add rollout dev environment key, and then commit that change. And so now we should be at a point, right, where our source code repository for our application will have the ability to communicate with the rollout dashboard because of those two keys that we provided it. So yep, I'm just kind of catching up in the instructions, right? We should now be at the create rollout feature flags portion of the instruction, right? We've added the keys to our application, and now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a feature flag in our code. We're not going to use that feature flag for anything. We're not going to gate any features with it, right? But we want to create an initial feature flag so that when we do deploy this application for the first time, we'll see that the rollout dashboard will actually automatically pick up on those brand new flags for us. And so we're going to do this inside a file called flags.js. And so I'm going to pause again real quick, make sure that everyone has gotten through this step, right? We should be at a point where your env development file and env production file has those two keys inside of them, right? And so again, we did this to enable the communication with the rollout dashboard, right? So actually each key here maps to the environment. So you'll see in a second here, once we do deploy our application to the development environment, the flags that we create will be available for us inside of this development environment in the rollout dashboard, right? So you can see right now, no flags in here, right? If I click into the flags view, nothing yet. We haven't created any flags. We haven't even deployed our application. So the rollout dashboard doesn't know anything about it. But since we've added those keys into our configuration files, once we do deploy the application will actually reach out to the rollout dashboard and it will kind of create that initial communication. It will pass along the flag information for us, and then we'll be able to control the feature flag values from the dashboard. Just a kind of quick explanation of where we are right now. So now let's go ahead and start on this create rollout feature flags portion, right? So again, we're going to navigate to the flags.js file, and you can kind of see in the instructions where that file lives, right? That file is inside source, utils, flags.js. And so I'm going to jump back over into my repo here. Again, make sure you're still on the development branch and navigate to that file, right? So click on source, utils, right? The third folder down from here, source, utils, and then flags.js. And again, I'll pause. I know I might be going a little faster than you all because I'm a little more familiar with this code, but this is where we want to end up, right? We want to end up inside this flags.js file. And the reason we want to end up inside this flags.js file, this is kind of how, with rollout, how you're going to be implementing feature flags and then anything to do with that kind of initial rollout setup, right? So this flags.js file is what we call a container class when it comes to rollout, right? You can see everything in here. There's not a lot in here yet, but everything in here is rollout related. So this is where we handle most of the rollout implementation within a specific application, right? So just to kind of quickly talk through what we're seeing in this file before we start adding stuff to it, you see in the first line, we're importing the rollout SDK into this file, right, into our application. And so, yeah, right now, this application is a Vue.js application. We're working with a JavaScript SDK. We have SDKs available in a ton of different languages. For those of you that may be interested in using feature flags on the back end, we have back-end SDKs. We have other front-end languages, mobile languages, things like that available to you, right? But this is kind of step one, right? In order to work with rollout, you need the rollout SDK in your code. And so then the next thing, right, this is where we're going to define the flags that we're going to be using. So you can see we actually have a flag in here already, right? We have a sidebar flag. If you've been, taking a peek at future instructions, you'll see that, we're going to be working with this flag in just a little bit. But we are also going to add a flag in here in just a second. But inside of this flags constant, this is where we're going to be defining all of our new flags. And so I just want to kind of talk about how you define a flag within rollout, right? So you can see first, this is what our flag is called, right? This is the variable we're going to use throughout our application. And then this is how you actually define it, right? So we call new rocks.flag. And then you see that we specify false in here, right? So the sidebar flag is a Boolean flag. It can either be true or false. And the way rollout works is you're going to initiate a new flag in the code first, right? Then the dashboard will pick up on that flag. And so since you are initiating a flag in the dashboard first, you need to provide it with a default value, right? What value will the flag, right? What will the flag behavior be by default, since we are implementing in the code first? And that's why we provide it with this false value. You can give it a true if you wanted to. If you want the default value to be true, you can. But for our example, right, the new flags that we're going to create are going to have the false value to start. We want our flags to be off, those features to be off in the code, but then we'll turn them on through the dashboard. This options here that's blank right now, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but this is where you would do some setup options when it comes to rollout specifically. And then finally, these two calls right here, this is where we actually establish the connection to the rollout dashboard, right? So the register call here creates the namespace for us, and it lets the rollout dashboard know about the flags that we define inside of this constant. And then the setup call, this is where we access that environment key that we were just using a second ago. right? So you can see this will go ahead and grab the environment key from the specific configuration file, right? If you're in the development environment, it'll use the development key. If you're in the production environment, it'll use the production key. But so this setup call is the call that actually reaches out to the rollout dashboard and establishes that communication. So this is your container class, right? So we're going to go ahead and click on our pencil because now we want to edit our container class. We're going to be adding a new flag to this container class. So let me jump back into the instructions here, right? You can see we want to add a title flag. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, jump back into my code here, I'm going to add a comma after my sidebar flag. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to add a title flag. You can see a title flag is defined the same way that the sidebar flag was, right? A title flag is also a Boolean flag. So we can have a value of true or false. We're going to give it the default value of false because we want this title feature that we're going to work on to be off by default. And so we're going to add this flag here. And I believe that's the only thing we're adding. And so then you're going to go ahead and commit it. One thing I want to touch on in the instructions throughout the rest of the workshop as we're going through this, since we are editing code, you are going to have kind of a full version of the edited file available to you, right? So if you do fall behind or you really want to make sure that you're not messing anything up, maybe you forgot the comma or something like that, you will have the full file available to you afterwards. So if you want to, you can expand on this, take the full flags.js code and paste that in here if you wanted to, instead of adding, finding a specific line, things like that, right? If you want to just catch up, you will have that available to you as well. So go ahead and commit this, right? That we're adding a new flag. I'm going to add a message here, add new title flag. And again, make sure you are committing to the development branch. We want to be on the development branch right now. So I'm going to go ahead and commit the change. And here we are, right? This is what our file should look like now. We should have a title flag in here. We still have the sidebar flag. Make sure you don't forget that comma in there. We don't want to run into errors. So this is what our container class should look like at this point. And so now we have one final step to go through before we can deploy our application and see it for the first time. And that is going to be adding the marker file. But again, I'll take a quick pause, make sure we're all on this page right now, right? So the last step that we just did is we went, right? So I went into source, utils, flags.js, right? That's the path that we took to get to our container class. We talked through what a container class is. Again, this is where you're going to be handling kind of all of your initial rollout implementation. And so I think the biggest aspect of this is this portion, right? The container class will become kind of your single source of truth when it comes to the feature flags inside of your application, right? A developer doesn't have to bounce between the rollout dashboard and their code to see what a flag is called or what the default value of the flag is, things like that, right? A developer can create a new flag and start using it in their code base without leaving the code base to start. So I think that's really cool. And so this is where, we'll see our flags in here. And what we've done so far is we've added this title flag to our container class, right? We've added one more flag. And in a second here, when we deploy our application, we should see these two flags that we've created in the rollout dashboard. But now, as I mentioned, there's one more step to get through before we can deploy our application, and that is going to be adding the marker file that I was pointing out in the instructions. So go ahead and navigate back to the root level of your repository. Right, click on microblog front end here. Again, make sure you're still on the development branch. This is where we've done all our work. So make sure you're still on the development branch. And if I hop back over into the instructions, you can see we're going to be adding a file called .vue.js, right? So you're going to want to go ahead and click create a new file, and remember what we're going to be calling this file, right? So I'm going to, at the root level of my repository, I'm going to click on this button right here, create new file. So again, we're not leaving GitHub for any of our code purposes. We're doing everything inside of GitHub. GitHub lets you create new files. So we're going to click on create new file, and we're going to call this file .vue.js. And I just want to make sure, yep, we're going to leave this file blank. We're not adding anything to it, right? All this file is a marker file. So before we commit this file, I kind of want to explain why we're doing this, right? So once you ran the setup job, right, if you navigate back to CloudBees core. I'm going to click out of the Blue Ocean view here. If I navigate back one step, right, you can see that our setup job created a pipeline for us, right? We actually created a pipeline that is looking at this repository, right? For each one of us individually, we now have a pipeline job that is looking at this repository. That pipeline will only run if there is a .vue.js marker file within a specific branch, right? So right now, neither our master branch or our development branch has this marker file. So if we edit as you've seen, right, we've been committing stuff constantly. We haven't actually kicked off any jobs inside of this pipeline yet. And so as soon as we commit this file, we'll have the marker file in our development branch. Once we do that, then that job within Jenkins, within core, will pick up on this repository, it'll pick up on that branch, and it will start building it for us, and then it will deploy it. And so that's what we're going to do right now, right? Again, just a file called .vue.js, nothing in it. We're going to add a commit message saying create marker file for, and again, we're going to commit directly to the development branch, and we're going to hit commit new file. And so now this is what your repository should look like, right? Now we've got this .vue.js file in there. If I navigate, and all of you should also do this as well, right? Let's navigate back into core. If you were still in Blue Ocean, I went ahead and exited out of it, right? You can exit out through that arrow. Let me just kind of show you. Right, so you'll see that microblog front-end job here, so you can look at it in Blue Ocean if you'd like. I think that's what the instructions are saying. You can see our development branch is currently running, right? For those of you that are familiar with Jenkins, maybe like the traditional, the classic view more, that is available to you as well, right? And so to navigate between Blue Ocean and the classic view, you're gonna click on this button up here in the top right, right? I personally prefer this view a little bit more. And so again, if I go back to, so this is our T master that each one of us has, right? Inside of that master, we have a folder that's named the same thing as our master. And inside of that folder, right, this is, we ran our rollout workshop setup job. This is where you see that pipeline that's associated with our application repository. So if I click into here, you can see that we will see the branches that have the marker file in them, right? So the development branch, now that it has the .vue.js marker file in there, you can see that that job is now running, right? This is the first time we've run the development branch. And so you can see this little ball bouncing over here. So if we actually click on it, that would take us to the build logs. If you're interested in that portion, you can kind of check out what is actually happening on the automation side of things, as good as Jenkins logs always look, right? But basically what we're doing in this job is we're building the code that we just put together, and then we're going to take that application and we're going to, first we're building it, we're pushing it, the image to image registry, and then we're going to take that and we're going to deploy it. Each one of us is actually going to have our own environment, right? We're all going to have our own domain that we'll be able to access our own application on, which is going to be really cool, right? We'll all be able to access our own application. And once this is done running, right, once the application deploys, the end goal of this is that we'll see the flags that we created, right, inside of source utils flags.js, right? The end goal of this setup lab is that we'll see these two flags that we've created inside of rollout, inside of this rollout dashboard in just a second. So let's check on our job. Still building and pushing. It might take a little bit since this is everyone's first time building it.
Hey, Greg, I wanted to point out that, yeah, I know Blue Ocean has its issues, but one thing that we added was labels for key steps. So for example, the URL, it'll actually say deployment URL on the step, and you can expand that individual step once it gets there.
Gotcha.
And then it'll be a little bit back. Otherwise, in the classic, you have to, the only way I know to get the URL is to go in logs and scroll down until you get to it. But this way it'd be isolated into one step.
Yeah, no, I can stay in Blue Ocean in the real thing.
Also, to what Greg was pointing out, the first build's the slowest, but we set up the pods templates to be connected to the master for 30 minutes. So if you run it, so once you run it once, everybody will have the same like Canico pod, and so the build will be much faster because it'll use a caching for the image build.
All right, so hopefully everyone at this point, and I'll wait a little bit if it depends on when you made that marker file commit, but everyone at this point, right, if we're still in Blue Ocean, you should see this deployment URL step, like Kurt mentioned. If you are in classic view, you're gonna have to scroll all the way to the bottom of the logs to see it. But basically here we've got the URL where you can go ahead and navigate to that, right? So we've been doing work in our development environment, so you can see we deployed our application to a development environment, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in a new tab. Fingers crossed. There we go. Ta-da. So hopefully everyone is seeing what I'm seeing right now, but they'll have their own GitHub org in the name here. Each one of us should have our own microblog application deployed. And so this is why we've been saying microblog. This is what this application is, right? It's a little blogging thing. You can post your feelings. It's kind of like Twitter, I guess. And so you can blog about it, things like that. So we're not going to do anything in the application itself right now. The important thing that we want to do is we want to hop into the rollout dashboard, and we're going to click on this flags button right here. If I click on that, you should now see that the two flags that we created inside of our flags.js file are now available to us in the rollout dashboard. And this is the big step, right? This is going to enable us to do the rest of the rollout workshop here. You should see the two flags. The reason it says default is because that is the namespace that we gave our flags. And so you should see default dot and then the two flag names here. So these flags, so those are the flags that we've created. You can also, if you go into a specific environment, our development environment is where we created these keys, and you click into the audit logs, you should also see that here, right, that our initial run was successful, and that we've added those two flags to our development environment as well. And that is the end of lab 1. We have deployed our application, each one to our own environment. Super cool. And in doing so, right, because we have our environment keys within our application code, we have created the communication between the application itself and the rollout dashboard. And now the rollout dashboard knows that we have two flags in our code, and we'll be able to control the flags once we actually create features that have those flags associated with them. But that is it for lab 1. Give yourself a pat on the back for making it here. I think that initial communication part can definitely be the toughest step to figure out for a lot of people. So if we've made it here, and I'll pause if you have any questions, add them in the chat or unmute your mic. I see we have a 503 somewhere for some people. Hopefully one of our helpers can help out with that. Maybe it's still deploying, but I'll just take a pause here, right? We should be at the point now at the end of lab 1 where we have two flags within our rollout dashboard, application deployed, and those are the two steps, the two things needed. And thank you, Logan, for helping out. So let me go ahead and jump back to the workshop slides for now, while some people are kind of catching up. Again, just to recap what we've done. We deployed our application, let the rollout dashboard know, hey, we have two flags in our application code. And now in this next lab coming up, we're actually going to start utilizing these feature flags by pushing out what we, experimental features and gating them behind feature flags and things like that. But again, I'll pause, let some people catch up. If you need a quick break of water or break for water, anything like that before we move on to the lab, you are free to do so.
Hey, Kurt and Greg, quick question, right? I know that you and Logan are helping out folks, right? But since we're going to be like backup on the breakout rooms, how can I set up like my user to be able to dig into, other users' masters?
We'll send out instructions for everybody to register ahead of time. on Monday, and Logan will make sure that you all have admin access.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started with lab number 2, called Gating Code with CloudBees Feature Flags. So first of all, quick recap, what are feature flags? What are we using them for, right? Feature flags allow you to put gates around new feature code, right? So flags are added to the source code of an application, which we've done. If I have my app open right now, or my code, right? We have our 2 flags in our application. Then we're gonna use those flags, right? A flag is used to wrap the code of a new feature, right? So we're gonna take those flags that we created, and we're gonna create a brand new feature, and we're gonna use those flags. We're gonna wrap that flag around the new feature, and then that's gonna act as our safety valve at that point, right? That feature, that code will only be on if that flag is on. The code will be off if the flag is off. That's the main idea for this lab. And as I mentioned earlier, talking about the SDKs, we have SDKs for a bunch of different languages, front end and back end development. Today, we are working strictly on front end with a JavaScript SDK when it comes to feature flags. And so one other thing to mention before we jump into the lab, one thing that we'll be doing in this lab is we're going to be creating what we call a configuration fetched handler. And so just a quick introduction to what that will do and what do we mean by configuration fetching, right? So in order to see the code, or so in order for the code to run that's gated behind our flag, we need to know 2 pieces of information, right? Has the flag value changed, right? So as you can imagine, as we keep talking about this, right, we're going to work on a new feature. That feature is going to be wrapped in a feature flag. So if initially that flag is false, which it is for us, right, how do we let our application know once we update the flag to be true in the dashboard? How would you let the flag know, hey, rerun this code with the now true value, right? We need to know if the flag value has changed at all. And then we need to know, where did this value change come from? Where was that initiated? Right, specifically in our case, we want to make sure that that flag change came from the rollout dashboard, and that's where the configuration fetched handler comes into play. Right, you can identify when the rollout SDK has loaded a brand new configuration, either from local storage or from the network, by adding a configuration fetched handler into your code. Right, and so it will return a fetcher result which has the following information in it, but basically at a very high level, the configuration fetched handler will let you know, or will let your application know, your application code, that it has received a new configuration, right? And so we'll touch on this in the lab itself, but that configuration would be me going into the rollout dashboard, updating the feature flag rules, and then hitting update configuration, right? Once you do that, then a new configuration will be generated. That configuration will be sent along to your end user's devices. And then once that configuration gets there, the configuration fetched handler can process that, right? It can tell, oh, hey, we just got a new configuration. Does that configuration have changes? Which is one of the things that we get from the fetcher result. Does that configuration have changes? If it does have changes, let's go ahead and, then you can tell it to do whatever. In our situation, we're going to refresh the page. So we got a new configuration with a new flag value. Let's refresh the page so that new flag value can take effect. Right, so at a high level, the configuration fetched handler basically will let your application know when there is a new configuration and where it came from. Right, a new configuration can either come from a local, from local storage, or from a network, right, which is from the rollout dashboard itself. And so we want to key in on the network one, or it can tell you, hey, I had an error processing or receiving the new configuration, and you can do things with that as well. Just a quick high-level explanation of what that is. We're going to be implementing this in our lab, so that our changes can take effect in real time for us. So now let's go ahead and jump into the lab itself. So in this lab, we're going to create a title component and add it to our microblog front-end sample application. So if I go here, right, you can see this is what my application looks like right now. You can see this posts component. We're going to go ahead and add a title over here where I'm waving my mouse, right? We're going to add this cool new, very experimental feature of adding a title to our blog. And so that's kind of the big focus of this lab, right? Is we're going to implement this component, but since it is so experimental, we're going to gate it behind the feature flag that we created earlier, right? We're going to gate it behind the title flag that we created. And since the title flag is false by default, once we redeploy our application, you'll see that we won't actually see the new title at all, right? It'll look like we didn't do anything. But then we'll jump into the rollout dashboard. We'll configure the value of that flag turning on the title, and we'll go from there. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into the instructions for lab number 2. So the first thing that we need to do, right, is we need to actually add the code for this new experimental feature, experimental component, right? And so that's this portion of the instructions. You want to be over here adding a title to the microblog post. So you're going to navigate to the posts.view file, which is inside of source view posts.view. And so again, we're going to take a little slow here, right? So I'm going to first navigate back to the root level of my repository, and then we're going to go into source. I already forgot where we're going. Source view posts.view. Source views and then posts.view. And so this is a Vue.js file, right? We're actually diving into the front end code for our application. You can scroll around in here, kind of dig into the code if you are interested in Vue.js. But so this is the code responsible for this, what you see here in front of you, right? And so if we jump into the instructions, what we're going to be doing, you can see here, right? The code in there is already utilizing the sidebar flag, and I'll touch on that in a little bit, but we're going to be adding the title flag into this code here, and you can kind of see that in the instructions. So let's go ahead and hit the pencil, right? We want to edit this file. And the first thing that we're going to do, right? So let's show off how we're utilizing the sidebar flag first, right? So jump to line 7. And so on line 7, you can see, right, we do have a sidebar feature in our code already, right? And it's gated behind this show sidebar function, right? This is a conditional. If show sidebar is true, then run all of this, right? Everything inside of here. Run it if show sidebar is true. Where is show sidebar? Show sidebar is right here on line 63. Show sidebar, again, this function will be true or false based on if the sidebar flag is enabled. And just to remind you all, I'm going to open this up in a new tab over here. Right, source utils flags.js. This is where we define our flags with their default values. Sidebar flag right now, since we haven't touched in the dashboard, is false, right? It's using that default value. So this flags.sidebar is enabled. If we were to call that right now, it would be false. And we are calling it right now because our application is running. You can see there's no sidebar, right? If you can picture what the code on line, from line 7 under would look like, which I can't personally, but there would be a sidebar component there. It's not there because this if is false, so we're not getting the code. So we already have a feature flag in place. That feature flag is running for us. We just kind of wanted to talk through that. But now what we're going to do, we're not going to focus on the sidebar flag just yet. We're going to actually implement a brand new feature, which is our title feature. Right. So again, we're going to scroll back down towards line 63, and we're going to add a similar function to the show sidebar one, right? We're going to add a function called show title. So let me jump back into my code here. You're going to be on line 63, right? Line 63, make sure to add a comma, hit enter, and then paste in that show title flag. Again, if if for some reason the lines are off in your file or you feel uncomfortable doing this kind of line by line, we do have the full post.view file at the end of these instructions, right? You see we have a couple steps left, but there is going to be that full post.view file with all the code in there. So you can actually take that whole file and copy paste it in instead of going step by step. That's available to you, right? So far we've added the show title function into our code, but we haven't actually added the title feature at all yet, right? So we have a function that will let us know if our title flag is enabled or not. And now we're going to go ahead and add the title component, right? So we're going to jump to line 5, and we're going to take this header here, right? Go ahead and copy all of this And so let me jump into my application code, scroll up to line 5. So you can see, right, this header class posts is what does this in our application right now, right? So I'm going to take that on line 5, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to replace it all with this new code snippet, right? And so you can see what we've done is we've added a new title to our post header within our application, but called show new title. Great title, but that title will only show up if our show title function returns true, and that show title function will only return true if the title flag is enabled. Does that make sense to everyone? This kind of little couple step process here of how the feature flag actually works, right? We have the feature flag in our container class. It's false by default right now. We grab that flag value by calling flags.title is enabled, map it to the show title function, and then we call that function. If that function is true, then we show the new title. If it's not, we don't. Any questions about any of that so far? Let me go ahead and take a look at the chat. Yeah, no semicolons for the native Java speakers here. Definitely. Good point. And then one little thing to highlight as well, for those of you who are maybe JavaScript experts, you noticed we didn't do this, right? Since there was already a feature flag in place, the important thing is we needed to import our container class into this file that we're working in, right? So that's over here on line 50. That might have been the instructions. I might have just skipped over it, right? But it's important to import the container class in here. So to actually call flags.title is enabled, you need to make sure they actually import the flags constant inside of here. So now that we've done that, right, now that we've created the show title function, we've added the new title component, right, we've added this new feature to our code, it's gated behind our feature flag now, we are gonna go ahead and commit it. Again, if you didn't follow along step by step, or if you got lost at some point, if you just wanna make sure that the edit you made on line 5 was the right one, you can just go ahead and take this entire post.view file, copy it in its entirety, and then paste it in its entirety as well. And then we're going to go ahead and commit that. Again, we're going to be on the development branch. So add title component with feature flag function. And I'm going to commit those changes. For those of you that are Jenkins pros, you will know that as soon as we commit this, we do actually kick off a new Jenkins job. It's going to build and deploy for us. But we do have one more piece that we want to add in our code here before we actually look at our application. So don't worry, if you see your Jenkins job running or if you see your application redeploy, that's fine. We're going to do one more piece before we actually take a look at what our application looks like. And that piece is adding the configuration fetched handler that I was talking about earlier, right? So we have our flag in the code now. We have our brand new feature in the code. It's gated behind the flag. Now we want to add the functionality that will let our application know when the flag value has been updated in the dashboard. And one thing I want to highlight real quick, if you do, move forward, you want to play around with rollout, you don't need a configuration fetched handler in your code to let you know, or to, like your application will work without a configuration fetch handler. It's just this enables the application to react to a brand new configuration in real time. And you'll see what the code looks like in just a second. But basically, you add an option into your container class, and then you can say, oh, okay, I have a new configuration, let me reload the page. Or I have a new configuration, let me reload the component that has been updated, right? It's really cool, kind of just the functionality you get with it. But again, the high level part of it is it tells you in real time, tells your application in real time when there's been an update to configuration. Normally, if you don't have this in here, the new configuration would take effect on page refresh for our application, for example. And that's why we trigger that with the configuration fetch. All right, so let's go ahead and again, make sure you're on the development branch. And we're going to navigate back to our flags.js file, that container class, right? And so if you remember, that lives inside of source utils and then flags.js file. So I'm going to click back to the root level of my repository. I'm going to click source. I'm going to click utils. I'm going to click on flags.js. We're going to be spending a lot of time in this file, right? Again, this is single source of truth when it comes to our rollout configuration. And so this is the file we want to be in. this is where we're going to implement our configuration fetched handler. So let's go ahead, jump back into the instructions and see what that looks like. So I'm going to actually expand this. You can see our flag.js is going to grow in size substantially here. And so that's why we're going to just want to go ahead and maybe take this entire thing, copy it. But let me talk through what we're actually doing here, right? And it kind of explains this on step 3. We're adding a console.log here, right? So basically what we're focusing on is this. This configuration fetched handler portion of it, right? So what this is doing is once this runs, right, it's going to fetch the results and then it's going to let us know, right, this is just for debugging purposes. It's kind of nice, you know, in case anybody in the workshop, maybe their configuration fetch handler doesn't work for whatever reason, we have this in here just to kind of help us out, right? It will actually print out the configuration status, right? Do we have a new configuration? Yes or no? If the new configuration that we pull in has changes, right? And so what we mean by changes, we'll see this in a second in the rollout dashboard. If there are changes as in, hey, okay, previously the flag was set to false, but now this flag is set to true, that means we have changes. So if there are changes in the configuration and the configuration was applied from network, this means it came from the rollout dashboard, then go ahead and reload the page. And then we have an else, if we received an error fetching the configuration, let us know what the error is, right? So those are the kind of 2 options. And the reason we have this in here, and we'll talk about this in a later lab, you can also make changes to your flag locally, but we only want to reload the page if the changes are official changes that came from the rollout dashboard. So just a kind of quick explanation of what we're adding into our container class. And then one other little thing, right, into our options that were empty before, we're adding the configuration fetched handler. This is, again, the options kind of handles a bit of rollout related options. And so that's what we're doing in here, right? We're making sure that the configuration fetched handler actually gets called as needed. So go ahead and copy the entirety of the flags.js code from the instructions, hop back in here into your flags.js file. Again, it's inside source, utils, flags.js. Just kind of get us there. Get familiar with this path. We do this a little bit more. And then click on the pencil, right? We're going to edit this file. I'm going to just select everything in here, Command A if you're on Mac. And then we're going to paste in here. There we go. A lot easier than finding what lines, you know, what goes on what line, things like that. And so we didn't change anything about our flags, right? The flags stay the same. The register and setup calls stay the same. But what we've done is we've added the configuration fetched handler into our container class. We've defined what we want to do when we get a new configuration, right? So that's what this if statement does for us. And that's why this is really customizable. In our case, we're doing just a hard refresh the page so the effects can take effect. But you can do this in a more elegant fashion where you just reload the component that has been updated, things like that, right? So this is really cool what you can do with this. And so let's go ahead and add a commit message. And configuration. Again, we're going to commit it to the development branch, hit commit. And so now that we've committed, this will kick off a pipeline run on our application here. I'll click out of Blue Ocean. Again, so as I mentioned earlier, a couple minutes ago, when we made our initial commit that kicked off the job. Now that we did another commit, it will kick off another job. This run will be a lot faster. As you can see, it was 2 minutes faster since we've already run the build the first time. There's caching and things like that. It'll go a little bit faster for us. So we're going to wait for it to run. And once it finishes running, it's going to redeploy our application. And then we'll take a look at our application. You know, I'll pull the room. Let me check the chat real quick. So, you know, pull the room. What do we think is going to happen? It's a little bit of a trick question. Will our blog look any different once we've redeployed? Don't be shy. Right, so this is our application right now. Once I redeploy it, will anything be different? Let me click the chat. Chris says no. I think you're right, Chris. And so the reason for that, exactly, look at that. The flag is set to false, right? So just kind of a quick recap while this is running, an explanation of what is going to happen. Let me close out of this. Right, our title flag right now is set to false. That's the default value. In the rollout dashboard, in the dev environment, we haven't done anything yet. We haven't set any rules or anything like that, right? And then if I jump back into source views post.view, right, this is the feature that we've implemented, right? This is the new code that we would be seeing if we were doing it the traditional way. We're just redeploying, right? Then we would see show new title up here next to the word posts, right? But since we have this if in here, right, now we'll only run this code if the title flag is true. And as we just showed, the title flag is false. So if everything goes smoothly, we've just redeployed, I come in here, refresh the page. Look at that, still looks the same. To me, right, to our end users, they don't know anything happened. They don't know that we just pushed out some experimental new feature that we don't know if it's gonna work or not. The end users aren't affected by this at all, right? There's new code out there, it's not on, it's sitting off, and now, again, in the real world, now we would let our testing team test this first, for example, in our production environment. So this is kind of this big idea of separating deploy from release, right? We've deployed the code is there, right? This code right now, if you want to go into your logs, make sure that the commit actually went through, right? That code is there, we've redeployed, is just turned off right now. And so that is kind of what we're gonna focus on next. And so again, you know, you can either just refresh the page, the URL hasn't changed. If you want to, you can go into the logs of your job, click on click on the deployment URL. You can do that in Blue Ocean as well. If I go in here, right, we have the deployment URL. It's the same URL, so you can just refresh the page. You can do a hard refresh just to really make sure, and still we don't see anything, right? It's gated behind that feature flag. And so that is the end of lab number 2. Kind of an anticlimactic finish where we don't actually get to see the fruits of our labors just yet, but know that the code is there. And then lab number 3 is where we actually go ahead and turn those values on and off. So let me go ahead and hop back into the slides here. Quick review of what we've done, right? We created an experimental component that, you know, we're testing out a brand new feature. What if our blogs had titles on them? Very experimental, right? We don't know how that's going to work. We don't know if our users are going to like it or not. So we gated it behind a feature flag, right? We gated that new feature behind our title flag. And the way we access that title flag is with the show title function, right? So we created that show title function that returns the Boolean value assigned to our title flag itself. We wrap that experimental feature in that flag. We created a configuration fetched handler inside of our container class, so that when we do, in a second here, update the flag value in the rollout dashboard, our application will actually pick up on that change in real time and refresh itself so that the new flag can take effect. And we did all this work on our development branch. Since we committed it on our development branch, our automation engine core kicked off this new job for us, redeployed our application. So the new code that we implemented is there. It's sitting there. It's just turned off right now. Or any questions so far about where we are? Thank you, Chris, for your participation. Very much appreciate that. And I'll take a little pause, let people catch up. You know, hopefully,
Hey, Greg,
if you're, yeah.
Greg, just aside of the workshop, right? Is it like this option, like the fetcher handler? Is it something that they're considering to build into the dashboard as a behavior that you say like, hey, this flag is going to have this behavior or not, right? Instead of having to actually add to the code.
Oh, so like through the dashboard, you're saying. So
yeah, you can have an option.
Like in the dashboard, you say if there's a new configuration in real time, update the application.
Yes, kind of to make it easier, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of cool, or even being like the standard behavior, right? Meaning,
right.
Hey, I believe everybody wants to reflect that right away, right? And then
right.
if they don't, you're gonna give them an option on the portal, like for that flag to not have that kind of behavior. Anyway, I just
no, yeah, I think that's a good point. It is cool. I think the problem with having it as like through the UI is what you do when you actually fetch the result is very case by case, right? You're not actually going to want to do a page refresh for everyone, because as you can imagine, right, if we were in the real world and I'm on a website and it just starts refreshing on me, I don't know why. I'm going to think that's weird, right? And so what you actually do when you fetch the configuration is case by case.
If you're in the middle of a transaction,
right.
Right, and like, hey, I'm filling this gigantic form. Yeah, I got it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of like a cool, I think for when we have like the quick starts and documentation on how to get started, I think it would make sense just to have this in there for maybe some of the more, the bigger sample applications, to have this in there and have like a comment explaining what it does. So I think this is a nice default behavior, like, hey, when you do get a new configuration, you can know you can act on it, basically. So we won't have this in here, that'll be commented out, but basically fetch a new configuration, do with that what you want.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no, great question. All right, so let me go ahead and jump into lab number 3, controlling the value of a feature flag. Okay. So in order to control the value of a feature flag with CloudBees rollout for this lab, we'll be creating an experiment in the rollout dashboard. So an experiment, you haven't really heard me say the word experiment just yet, right? We've been saying feature flag so far, right? An experiment in the rollout dashboard refers to the definition of a rule set around a specific feature flag. So it's inside of this experiment that we're going to decide if a flag should be on or off, for which users, on what date, what percentage of users, things like that, right? So in the code, we define our flag and it gets to be true or false, right? In the rollout dashboard, this rule set around the flag can be way more complex than that, right? We don't want our flags to just be on or off, right? We want all those benefits that I was talking about earlier of user segmentation, of gradual rollouts, things like that. And all of that happens inside of an experiment. And we'll touch on that more as we create the experiment as part of this lab. We just kind of wanted to explain to you what an experiment is, right? It's any rule that's going to apply to our feature flag that's going to be defined inside of the experiment in the rollout dashboard. And one quick thing to highlight before we jump into this lab, one little aspect that it already has been implemented in your code, but we're going to touch on in this lab, is this idea of the flags override view. So the flags override view is something that comes with rollout, right? With any of the front end SDKs, you have this available to you. And it's this kind of really nice debugging tool, right? It's there for developers and QA folks, right? Testers. It gives them the ability to expose a view that shows the current status of each flag, right? So in a second, you'll see we can set the value of the flag in the dashboard, and that value might be different from your default value in the code, right? So the override view will actually show you the current status of each flag inside your application. And then it also allows those users to override those values locally on their machines, right? Just in their environment. So they're not actually changing the flag value in the dashboard with this. They're just changing the value locally for testing purposes, right? You can imagine with the introduction of feature flags, now you have two things you need to test in your UI, right? You need to test what the UI would look like with the flag on and with the flag off. And so the flags override view gives your developers and testers the ability to do this locally without having to jump back and forth between the dashboard and their application. And so that's kind of really nice. And you can see, right, there's a couple of different states, and I'll touch on those once we actually start playing around with the flags override view. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this lab number 3. Right, in this lab, we are going to control the value of a flag by creating an experiment in the rollout dashboard. Again, the experiment is basically going to end up being the rule set around our feature flag, right? How we determine if a flag is on or off for a specific user. For local testing and development, we're going to need to specify values for each flag on our local machines. In order to do this without affecting other users' work, we're going to be using the flag override view, and we'll do like a cool little demonstration of what it actually looks like, right? Like what it would look like for two developers working in the same rollout application utilizing the flag override view. So let's go ahead and jump into the instructions here. So we should be inside of this lab using CloudBees rollout to control flags. And so quick recap of where we are right now. Sorry if I keep repeating myself over and over, but we have these two flags, sidebar and title. right? We've added our configuration fetched handler, so our application will react to us updating the flag values in real time. We've implemented a new feature, experimental feature, right, inside of, inside of source views post.view, right? This code is currently sitting there in our development environment, right? We have this new title code, but it's just turned off right now because the flag is currently false, right? So this is our development environment application. That code is there, is just turned off right now. And so what we want to do in this lab is we're actually going to jump into the rollout dashboard and we're going to control the value of that title flag. Let's get that title feature out to our users. They're waiting for it. So let's go ahead and jump into the rollout dashboard. So jump into the rollout dashboard. If you're not in the development environment, right, maybe you're looking in the flags view or you're in the app settings, go ahead and click on development on the left-hand side over here. So we should all now be in the development environment inside of rollout, and you should see that you're in the experiments view by default. Again, the experiments view is where we will see all of the feature flags inside of this environment that have a rule set defined for them. And so the reason you don't see anything in here yet, right? We have these two flags. They're there in my development environment. You know, they're sitting there, but we haven't created a rule set for them just yet. And that's what we're going to be doing in this lab, right? We're going to tell the flag more, we're going to give it more specific rules of when the flag should be true and when the flag should be false. And that's what defines an experiment in our case. So go ahead and click on create a new experiment. Give me a second here. All right, and so in new experiment, you can see, right, you're faced with this little drop down. And so this drop down, you know, for anyone that wants to, you know, utilize rollout in the future, right, you can see we got two flags in here. This drop down will be populated by the flags that you define inside of your container class, right? We have two flags in here now. Those are the two flags that we see inside of our rollout dashboard. If I were to go ahead and add a third flag in here, redeploy my application, then that third flag would show up in this dropdown, right? So we're going to go ahead and click on title, default.title, and we're going to click on set audience. And now we'll be able to set the rule for my title flag, right? So you can see now it gets a little more complex than the flag just being true or false, right? We can see that now there's rules in place, right? So this, what you see in front of you, this is what we call our flag default behavior in the dashboard itself. You see, you can't actually edit the all versions and all users. And the reason we have that there is we don't want it to end up in a situation where, you know, some user doesn't fall inside of the rules and the flag doesn't know how to behave, right? So you're always going to have this default behavior that at the end of the day, for all users, this is what our flag is going to behave like. And so right now, this is set to false. And so let me just make sure I'm following along with the lab correctly. We are going to update the flag value from false to true. So this is that big step, right? Right now, our code is sitting there, right? The application's live. The new feature that we've implemented is there, is just turned off. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to click on this false dropdown. We're going to switch from false to true, and we're going to hit update audience. And what that is doing is now we are changing the value of the flag from false to true for all users of my application, right? So even though the flag is false in my code, it'll now be true. Let me navigate back here. Look at that. In real time, we have show new title. You saw I didn't refresh the page. It did it on its own. I didn't redeploy the application, right? I think that is in the instructions, or maybe not, but I think it's kind of fun, right? I can show you, you know, I did not redeploy this application, right? You can see the last run that ran was our redeployment run. We didn't change any code, right? We updated this in the dashboard. No need to redeploy, and now this new component shows up. And that is, again, that's kind of the end of separating deploy from release, right? Last lab we deployed, this lab we released the new feature, right? And I'm going to pause there. Hopefully everybody is at this point. Hopefully everyone's application did this automatically because of the configuration fetched handler. If you're not here, or maybe your configuration fetch handler didn't work correctly, definitely shoot something in the chat or let us know. But yeah, I think everybody should be at this point. Is everybody here? Is everybody seeing the show new title? I will take the silence as a yes. Everyone's doing amazing with the workshop. So now let's go ahead and keep moving on with the lab. Yeah, thanks, Logan. Okay. So now if you remember, right, we do have another feature flag in our code sitting there. So the sidebar feature, probably even more experimental than the title feature, in my opinion. We haven't actually seen what it would look like at all just yet, but there is this sidebar functionality sitting there in the code. So let's go ahead and enable that as well. Right, let me make sure I'm following the instructions correctly here. Yep. Okay, so let's jump back out, jump back into the rollout dashboard, click on the experiments view, right? So just to talk through what the experiments view looks like once you actually create an experiment. So you can see, right, we have our title experiment, which reflects the rules for the title flag. You can see if that experiment is active or not. Active means, are the rules that I put in place, are they currently on, right? And so that's this big green button right here. And so this is, I mentioned a kill switch a lot earlier, right? You can actually shut off a feature, right? You can shut off an experiment by clicking this button. You can see that it will kill the experiment. We're not going to do that. But basically, once you do kill the experiment, the rule stays in place, right? So the rule that we created, this obviously is a very complicated rule, but if you do create a more complex rule, that rule would stay in place. It's just you would go back to the default flag functionality that's set in the code, right? So if you do push something out into production, release it to your users, and it does break, the kill switch is really, really handy in that situation, because now you don't have to do a rollback or a hot fix or a patch in order to address the issue, right? In order to make sure that your customers are no longer seeing the issue. You can just shut off the broken feature. Now your customers won't know that that feature was even there, and then you can address it without the issue still affecting your end users. And so this experiments view, right, you can see if the experiment is active or not. You can see when it was created. You can also see when it was last edited. And so this is important. For feature flags, a lot of people kind of ask the question, are feature flags supposed to be permanent or not, right? Do we want do you want a conditional in your code for the rest of your application life cycle? And the answer usually is no, right? And we'll talk kind of through this, right? If you do a canary deployment, right? You want a feature flag in place as you're testing things out, right? So first, you test in production for your internal testing team, then you slowly roll out a feature to your user base. Once you have once you've released a feature to 100% of your users, right? You can see we have some other things here, right? So once we see that all of our users are getting the true value of our flag, for example, and the flag was created a year ago and it hasn't been touched in 2 months or something, or 3 months, 4 months, whatever, right? That should be assigned to you. That's what we call a stale flag, right? The flag really doesn't have a point of being there because it's been fully turned on for 6 months now. We haven't had any issues. We haven't had to roll back or anything like that. What is that conditional in my code doing for me? Not anything really, right? So you can get a lot of kind of useful information on all of your experiments, on all of your flags from this view here. Sorry for that little tangent. But so now let's go ahead and implement the second experiment, right? Let's go ahead and set the rule for our sidebar flag. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create a new experiment. And so now, if you notice, we only have one option available to us, or two options, but only one flag available to us in the dropdown here. So we're going to pick the sidebar flag. So the reason you only have one, once you have created an experiment for a flag, you cannot create multiple experiments for one flag, right? So once you've created an experiment for one flag, that flag isn't available to you in this dropdown anymore. So let's go ahead and select the sidebar flag, click on set audience. And now, again, we're faced with the same screen that we saw before. I'll go through this a little quicker now, not as much to explain, but we're going to go ahead and update this flag from false to true. We're going to hit update audience. Cool, saved successfully. And again, in real-ish time, we should see if I navigate back here. There we go. That took a little bit longer, but again, I didn't click the refresh button. It did it on its own, right? my application, no deployment. Again, I'll refresh here, nothing in my hands, right? We didn't redeploy the application. We just took existing code that was here, right, inside of source, views, post.view, right, line 7, right? This code was there, all of this, it was just turned off. And so then once we updated the flag in the rollout dashboard from false to true, now we get to see the sidebar feature as well. Not just we, right? All of our users, right? That's what the rule that we put here. All users across, across the entire world, if they come to this website right now, they would get to see both our new title and our new sidebar, which includes the users list. So now we've done the separation of deployment from release on 2 different features, right? So again, if I click back out into the experiments view, you can see here are my 2 experiments, right? The 2 rule sets for my feature flags. We get to see how many users have interacted with this flag. And what's cool is, so that's the number of users, the number of users that have interacted with that flag, but it also shows you which value those users have gotten, right, by percentage base. And so since our title flag has been on for a bit longer now, every time we've kind of come back here, refresh the page and stuff like that, right, that flag now gets skewed more, right? That percentage gets skewed more. And so this is kind of cool. You can see which version of the flag your users are getting in, again, real-ish time. And so I believe the last portion of the lab is going to be using the flag override view. And so let me go ahead and show you. So that is something that has already been implemented. We're not going to be doing anything in the code to implement this. I'll jump into the code in a second to show you what the implementation looks like, but this isn't going to require any coding on our end. But each one of us on our version of the application, we have this, you can see this dev button on my nav bar up here. If you click on this dev button, that will pop up the override view, right? And so you can see right in the override view, we have our 2 flags, right? The 2 flags, and we have their original value. And what the original value reflects is the value that is set in the dashboard for this local environment, if that makes sense, right? So again, we really don't have a complex rule here in place right now. The flag is on for everyone, but we can make this more complex where we can say, only users in the US have this feature on, users coming from other parts of the world will have it off, for example. So the override view shows us the original value of this flag for this user, right? So for this user, this flag is currently set to true. And so what we can do is we can actually change that, right? Again, this is meant for local development and testing purposes, debugging purposes, things like that. So I can come in here as a developer. I don't have to go into the UI to change the flag from true to false, right? I can just update it to false. It will tell me what the original value was, right? Just so you don't forget. And then I can refresh the page. And now, right, the application, right, this code in here, right, this if show sidebar, it is now using the value set in the override view, right? We set the value of the flag to false. This value is now going to be false. And so just to kind of, the important thing here though, is this is happening locally, right? And so I think the instructions kind of show you this. I'm going to open up an incognito window. I'm going to navigate to it. You can see that there, right? For that user, if I open up the override view, right, it is still using the original value set in the dashboard. So we still see the sidebar view. So even though my developer changed their flag value from true to false, this still is only affecting them. It's just local for debugging purposes, kind of neat. You can see what your UI would look like with all the flags set to false, run your tests, then do the same thing, right? You can either set the flags individually back to their original value, or you have this reset all overrides button, which will set all the flags back to their values that they're meant to have from the dashboard. So once I do that, refresh the page, now we're back to what my real environment looks like. And that is it for showing off the flag override view. Real quick, let me go ahead and show you what it would actually take to implement that, right? Obviously, you probably don't want this button available in your production environment, for example. So let's go ahead and kind of talk through what it looks like in terms of implementing it in your code. So we're going to navigate to source components /nav.view inside of my repository, right? So again, step back to the root level, source components, nav.view, and inside of this file, let me check what lines we're supposed to be on. So first of all, we'll jump to line 16, right? So inside of this file, line 16 or line 15 and line 16, right? We have this little snippet of code, right? So navbar item, this is our navbar, right? So if isDev, right? So we have a function called isDev. If that function is true, then this button will be there, right? And what our isDev function is doing, we'll check it out in a second. We want to make sure that this functionality is only available to our developers and our testers on the development environment. We don't want this out in production. Obviously, you don't want your end users being able to turn their features on and off. You know, this is something we want for our testers only, right? So we have this conditional, making sure that this is only available in the dev environment. If it is, right, then you have this dev button, and on click, we're gonna do rollout override. And so rollout override is on line 45 or 53. Line 45 is we're just importing, right? Line 45, we're importing the rollout SDK. We need to import the rollout SDK for this functionality, but that's about it, right? You need to import the SDK, and then you need to tell it what to do when somebody clicks the button. And what that something is when somebody clicks the dev button, we are gonna run rocks.show overrides. So this is not something that you don't need to code anything about this component yourself. Pops up. You don't need to code anything about this component yourself, right? This is built into the rollout SDK for all front-end SDKs with rocks.show overrides. That's what pops up, and all the logic and everything like that is handled for you. And then this is our isDev function down here, right? We just need to make sure that the environment that we're in is the development environment for it to show up. And that is the end of lab number 3, right? So let me jump back into the workshop slides to kind of talk through what we've done. So in this lab, we have created 2 experiments, right? We had 2 features, 2 experimental features in our code that were sitting there shut off before this lab, right? The title and the sidebar. And so then in this lab, we went into the rollout dashboard. We set the rules for those flags, and we turned both of those flags on through the dashboard only, right? And then we use the flags override view in the UI to show you what a developer or a tester, how they would utilize this tool to basically toggle flags on or off locally just on their machines. That is the end of lab 3. And so I'm gonna pause right here, kind of make sure that we're all caught up. So we shouldn't have done anything in the code for this lab, right? We were just kind of clicking around in the rollout dashboard, setting rules or creating experiments, setting rules, things like that. And then we played around with the flags override view. And yeah, as Koyan mentioned, the flags override view currently does not trigger the configuration fetched handler. There's no way to do that. I think that would be nice to have in place so I don't have to refresh the page. So I think that would be a nice RFE for sure. All right. I know